Officially, the clock reads 12:15 Tuesday afternoon, February 18th. It could also just read the dead of the offseason, where people, even across media, are just going, I don't know what I have for you this week. I am not among them because I have dragged Mike Giardi, his fingernails digging into the earth as I pull him back into the show for probably the 56th time that we've had the Pats Interference podcast. In the dead of winter, it is cold out, it is windy out, it is icy out, and no one wants to remove the ice around at least where I live. But you're not here for that. Neither is Mike, though we will complain and have already off air. We're here to tell you, watching and listening right now, what the next 3 weeks are actually going to be like. Behind the scenes with us from 4 a.m. in Indianapolis bars to sitting at home like losers. And there's no person that fits that Venn diagram better than me. But second, the runner-up would be Mike Giardi. And so, again, here he is, Tuesday, dead of winter, dead of the offseason. How are you, pal?
I'm good, but I will not be at any bars at 4 a.m.
Oh. What are you going to the combine for then?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, I can't do that physically anymore. Come on, I'm old. It's like it hurts too much. Like, you used to be, you do that, you could suck it up the next day, maybe two. By the end of the week, you got no voice. You're starting to feel sick. You're breaking down, right? Now it's an immediate sickness. I can't move. I'm completely useless, not just the next day, but the entire week. Like, I got to be somewhat productive when I go there. So I have to balance it.
That's fair. This reminds me, not to throw pal Phil Perry under the bus, where he does not belong at any time ever. But my man may or may not have taken a nap on a bench in the Indianapolis Convention Center one morning. Granted, he was up for an 8 a.m. press conference that I was not up for last year. And the reason we bring all this up is not to tell like little media fun stories, which we will later, though. It is, again, as I said, to take you behind the scenes. You really want to know what the NFL Combine is like for agents, for players, for media, for teams? We're about to tell you. You want to know what free agency is like for players, for agents, for teams and media? We are about to tell you. But first, we are going to get to your mailbag questions. Thank you for everyone asking and hanging in for the dead of winter, which is about to end soon next week when the Combine kicks off in Indy. Mike and I will be there. And we need to talk about T. Higgins because today the franchise tag window has opened. He, to my knowledge, has not officially received the non-exclusive franchise tag. That, though, is coming. So he's basically off of the board. When you saw that news yesterday that this was expected, your reaction was what?
I told you so. and I don't mean that in like, I know, you know everything. No. Like, it's just, I think starting at about November, the buzz started to come out of Cincinnati. It wasn't just Burrow talking. It was Jamar Chase talking. And then having covered that team for a few years for the NFL Network, starting to like reach out to people because obviously it's pertinent now to what I do because we all looked at T. Higgins and said, like, that can change their wide receiver room in a positive manner. Like, that's something that if he's out there, they should be interested in. And sort of getting that, like, don't get too crazy about that. Don't start thinking that's going to happen. Like, he's important. And I wrote the other day, Jamar Chase is obviously number one on their list of we got to get this done. He's entering the fifth year of his contract. He wants $40 million a year. He might very well get $40 million a year the way things are trending. But T. Higgins is second on their list, ahead of Trey Hendrickson, ahead of Jermaine Pratt, who just asked for a trade last week. Like, they're prioritizing those two guys, and it's the gap between T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson is considerable in terms of what they're willing to do and what they want to do. And it's, I guess, at this point, it's what Joe Burrow wants. Joe Burrow's going to get. And quite frankly, I don't blame him because, as I was talking on my podcast yesterday with Will on the All 32 pod, like, if this goes in the wrong direction, if they don't manage to satisfy Chase and Higgins and therefore satisfy Joe Burrow, like, when does Joe Burrow say, hey, you know what? Screw you guys. I don't want to play here anymore. I'm pulling the Carson Palmer. You guys have done this for too long. Like, I could totally see him pulling a power play like that. So take care of him.
So it's an interesting point that I would happily take off air, but we have to steer back into Patriots land because the reason I bring this up, of course, is because he was number one on everyone's board,
yes.
Right?
I went on a rant there. Right out of the chute, I went left.
It's a good place, though, because I think, okay, let's stop and do the Bengals thing quickly because this also applies to the Patriots whenever the time does come to pay Drake May. Because had the Bengals signed T. Higgins and you retain him and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and their collective cap hits are north of $100 million, let's say, or close to it, leading the league, You're basically where the Dolphins are right now. And obviously Joe Burrow is a big upgrade over Tua, but you leave yourself such little margin of error with all of your other signings, which need to provide surplus value. Like your defensive linemen are not going to be the highest paid in the league. Your corners are not going to be the highest paid in the league. Your safeties are not going to be the highest paid in the league. Your offensive linemen might be close, but they're not going to be at the top. You need to get better than whatever money they signed for out of those players. That's hard to do. That's what everyone's trying to do. So when everyone says here in New England, yes, take advantage of the rookie contract. Everyone's favorite talking point about the NFL the last 5-10 years since the last CBA or 2 CBAs ago. You just need to be mindful that when you build your team just of quarterbacks and receivers, it's likely you'll lack at the positions that just powered the Eagles to a Super Bowl up front. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. As much as I'm happy to straddle the go nuts, sign whatever receiver blank check, there is an opportunity cost to that. And I'm not just talking about salary cap. Do you have a rebuttal?
No, I think it's interesting too. You talked about the talking point of the rookie contract and everybody wants to take advantage of it. How many teams have won a Super Bowl title with a quarterback on a rookie contract, not named the Kansas City Chiefs?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I don't believe there are any. So we love to say, and I understand it. You can obviously build up your team quicker because you're not paying the quarterback $50-60 million a year. It's going to be 70 in 5 years from now, whatever it is. But it's not the cure-all. People don't just. It hasn't just happened. It's not like an automatic. Oh, they're in the AFC Championship game because they got a quarterback on a rookie contract. It just doesn't work that way.
Right, but I think the counter to that, as we again. Mindful because this applies to the Patriots and that this is how you want to build the next 2, 3, 4 years, is that the bar can still be high and met and not be winning a Super Bowl. Like the fact that you failed and came up short of Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, who have won most of those Super Bowls starting in 2013, virtually all of them, is not a failure. You're just everyone else but Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, the 2 greatest quarterbacks to ever walk the earth. Now, the Eagles have done it while paying Jalen Hurts, and this is not to argue that you shouldn't pay quarterbacks. It's just to say that, like the Eagles, you need to hit on second-round picks like Cooper DeJean. You need to hit on Zach Bond, who had a 1-year flyer in free agency and becomes an all-pro. Like that's where the team building comes into this, as much as you can still and should spend around the quarterback, because I think the Patriots will, and it's not guaranteeing anything. And even if you come up short, stinks to be the Buffalo Bills, the Sisyphus of the NFL, just in perpetuity. But for now, not so bad. All right. So beyond that, were you what's your plan B now without T. Higgins? I'm on the record, big Chris Godwin guy.
I like Godwin a lot too. Obviously the medicals are going to be critical here. That's
Yes.
the dislocated ankles, a serious injury. He's had a couple now in his career, and not dislocated ankles, a couple serious injuries. But if you feel like he's on track to do that, he's someone who can play outside. 2 years ago, he was lined up outside 61% of the time versus, or what was it? Something of that number. Like this year, he was predominantly in the slot, but the year prior, he was predominantly outside. So he's someone who's capable of doing both. He's better inside. I know some people will say, well, if Pop Douglas is your best receiver, why would you want to take someone that moves him out? And I would say Chris Godwin's a better receiver than Pop Douglas is and probably ever will be. I guess there's, whatever. We're entering year 3. It's a big year for Pop. But I'm not staying away from Chris Godwin because I have Pop Douglas on my roster. He's not that guy who nope, don't worry about that. Because some will tell you that last year they didn't pick Ladd McConkey in part because they had Pop Douglas on the roster. And I would have said, excuse me, what? That wouldn't make sense to me then. And it, again, wouldn't make sense to me now if Chris Godwin is healthy.
So I make fun of this point all the time because I think this skill in the list of things I want out of my receivers is much lower than it is in the perception of receivers. Chris Godwin also a much better run blocker than Demario Douglas. And as much as that's everyone's favorite, oh, you know what this receiver's really good at? Great run block. Cool. I need him to get open and I need him to catch passes. And there are places for this. And I understand that it can take a 8 to 10 yard gain on the ground to an explosive or maybe a big touchdown if your receivers continue to block downfield. Trust me, that is not lost on me. Okay, a lot of things are, that is not among them. But what Chris Godwin is best at is not run blocking. it's because he can get open and catch the ball. And like you said, he's much better at that than Demario Douglas. We're not building the roster around Demario Douglas. Any other names, just real quick, before we get to mailbag?
I mean, Darius Slayton to me is one that jumps out again. If now Higgins is off the market and you want the big down the field guy, X receiver, he fits that bill. He's more explosive than Kayshon Boutte. Look, I knock Kayshon a little bit because the ego thing is nuts, and I just like tamp it down, buddy. You're an NFL player. That's great, but you're not what you're pretending to be. But he's a little bit out of position, right? He should probably be more of a Z than an X, but because they didn't have anybody or what they had at X, he was the best guy. You rolled him out there. But I think Slayton is someone that when you look at sort of the Giants passing offense and the quarterbacks that he's played with, like he's had pretty good production there, even though their passing offense has been subpar. So to me, like that's not a bad pivot if that's where you turn and say, hey, here's 3 years and $36 million, the Darnell Mooney contract in Atlanta for Darius Slayton. Like he's 28. I can get behind that. Like it's not breaking the bank. It's not something that after a year or two, you couldn't say, oh, it's not working. Get out of here. Oh no, we're in cap jail. Like that's none of those things to me. I think he's a pretty solid player.
I agree. And I also say this to someone who laid out his worst case scenarios for the Patriots this offseason. And if they do top out at Darius Slayton, I will stand by the fact that that is the worst case scenario because whether it's via the draft or trade or free agency, you need to do better than Darius Slayton, even if I do agree he's a very solid player. I'm just sick of solid right now.
I know, but so here's the problem, and this is again why being bad this year, like it was. You're picking 4th overall, you're picking 38th in the second round. It's not a good draft for the positions that you need. There's not a, oh my God, that's a generational guy at wide receiver. Oh my God, that's a generational plug and play tackle for the next 10 years. I'm sure there'll be a guy in the draft that does that. There always is, right? Like, but it's not, he's not sitting there at 4 unless you're a huge Ted McMillan guy. Like, and I think he is a tier below the Jamar Chase types, which again would still be better than what you have. But like, to me, I don't know, like I'd much prefer the Darius Slayton than saying, you know what, let's just run it back with Kayshon and Javon and hope that, whatever, like that.
Oh, I'm not even considering them. My brain will not allow me to consider the run it back approach. And my response to you about like, yeah, they could top out at Darius Slayton. That's still an upgrade. Yes, that's true. My retort to the retort would be the same I've said of the offensive line. Like, I get the options aren't great. You just have to do better than they did last year with Vidarian Lowe and Calvin Anderson will come back.
Yeah, but they might. Right, but they might not. But they might not be able to do better. And this is like
your job, though, to do better. That's definitively what the front office is, to rebuild the roster, bring a better football team. When you suffered at the positions of offensive tackle and receiver for the last 3 years, that have almost single-handedly
how many
football team.
But how many good? Right, but this is like a fan mentality. Like, oh well, we got this money and we got these picks, and we're gonna fill the holes. And it's like, well, there aren't guys to fill the holes. So how are you like? Good left tackles aren't available. Like you look at free agency, we talk about Ronnie Stanley, and then like you go to the next tier, and a couple of those guys are solid players. Like they're not, oh my God, like they're world beaters for you, but like they'd be better than what you have. But it's not like you're not calling, I don't know, you're not calling the 49ers and saying, give me Trent Williams. Like, I mean, Trent Williams got traded, so that's the poor example. He got traded from Washington to San Francisco, but he got traded because they mistreated him and there was a whole like medical thing there. And he was like, I'm not playing for you anymore. Generally, those guys don't get traded. So like, you're not finding a difference maker, like a premier, anybody's a difference maker from what they had, but a premier difference maker, you don't find those guys. You're just not like, I have to foam the runway. That's not going to happen.
I get it. My thinking is last year specifically, because this was my answer to offensive tackle, and people within the team told Doug Cott, well, what did you want us to do? I said, well, Jermaine Illuminor was over there, a guy you had in the building, who is a solid starting right tackle, proven that at Vegas, proven it with the Giants, even for a stint here. If you wanted to come back, give him the bag, as opposed to the guy who played left tackle in college 6 years ago in Chickasaw, played a dozen snaps exactly in Cincinnati, and then literally, as his position says, left. He is the peak left tackle now coming back in the league because he doesn't have to deal with everything that was the 2024 Patriots. Indirectly, though, It's a good job by us because we have hit on like 4 different mailbag questions. And I want to go to this one because, again, Darius Slayton, if it's a good contract, I'm probably going to give it a B. We will do grades instantaneously at the Boston Herald. Stay tuned for free agency. But overall at the position, the grade would be lower if he's the highest talent that they bring in. So this question from Corey says, rather than trading for T. Higgins or DK Metcalf, would it be better to sign Davante Adams, or no, I think he means Davante Adams, or Chris Godwin, and trade a lesser pick for either Cooper or Myers? So Cooper Kupp, obviously. Not sure who Myers is referring to unless it's their old pal Jacoby. I don't think that's happening. Also not spelled like Jacoby Myers. Spells his last name. I've done a really good job vetting this question, but I think his point is, how high are you on signing Davante Adams or Chris Godwin or trading for Cooper Kupp? Because I would say all of those names, even though there are complications with all of them, Chris Godwin, my number one guy included, whose price just went up, by the way, if T. Higgins is off the board, they are all better than Darius Slayton. And that is what I would say is it's hard, but that's what the money's for. You to get the deals done to improve your roster if you're LA Wolf, Ryan Counter, or whomever.
Our good friend, you're my good friend, Tom Curran, brought up Davante Adams on TV last week. And this sort of just dropped it on the air. And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And then literally as I'm driving home, I'm going, you know what the problem with Davante Adams would be? I don't think Davante Adams is a real big fan of Josh McDaniels. So I don't know that Davante Adams would want to play for Josh McDaniels, even though Josh would not be his head coach as he was in Vegas. And by the way, he was one of the guys smoking cigars and celebrating when Josh was fired. It's a great thought because he can still play, but I don't think that that's what Davante Adams is looking for at this point in his life. And so I would immediately say, strike that from the list. He's not coming here. Cooper Kupp is a call you make. The one thing, and it's probably not going to cost much more than a 5th or 6th round pick. I would imagine you'd want to redo his contract. The one thing I would caution people about, for as good as you're hearing the stories about what kind of guy he is and the influence that he can have in the room, is he became persona non grata in that offense. And it wasn't as if we're talking about an offense that was chock full of playmakers. We're talking Demarcus Robinson. We're talking Tutu Atwell, aside from Puka Nacua. And somehow over the last, 10, 11 weeks of the season, go look at it, he's out there, but he ain't getting the football. So, and he's 31, 32. So again, it's I wouldn't hate it if they traded a 5th round pick or 6th round pick for Cooper Kupp. Fine, that's fine, right? But I'm not expecting Cooper Kupp of 2 or 3 years ago. I'm not even expecting Cooper Kupp who dusted you for 6 and 100, earlier this past season. It feels like that guy isn't there, or if he is, it's once in a blue moon kind of at this point in his career. So, again, they're sort of in a rock and a hard place. And this is the other part about where we get to the free agency conversation. Oh, they've got all this money and they change their roster. Well, they can change their roster, but not in the way that you think they can, because free agency isn't it's just not the be all end all anymore. The good players generally don't get to free agency. We're seeing it now with T. Higgins. Whenever that happens, they just don't let them get there, and if you do get there, there's a reason. If Ronnie Stanley gets there, I know Baltimore has some cap stuff that they have to work through, but he gets there because they looked at his medicals and said, we got a miracle season out of him, and we're probably not willing to go, to the X degree to keep him on our roster.
So quickly on Ronnie Stanley, younger than Cooper Kupp, I think still has more football left in him than Cooper Kupp. That is the only blank check that I would offer if I'm the Patriots, because again, given the significance of the position, your history at that position, and who he would be protecting, which, let's be clear, face in future the franchise all-in-one rolled into a number 10 jersey. On Cooper Kupp, I've said I'm not a huge fan of this. And again, I understand the intangibles and the leadership. Maybe there's a dead cat bounce for 2025 where he resurges, we get the old Cooper Kupp, but that's not happening again at 33. And whatever the money is, you could split it with the Rams. The point is they know something that you don't. And as you said, It's on the tape, and this is a really good kind of way to divide people who are studying and have looked at Cooper Kupp recently versus just have the image of him in the Super Bowl and, as you said, dusting the Patriots, as a lot of receivers got to do this past season, because of blown coverages, etc. But you'll also note in that same game, the Patriots were doubling Demarcus Robinson at certain points because they believe Matthew Stafford was as likely to go there as Cooper Kupp, who they can handle one-on-one. Christian Gonzalez also somehow and Demarcus Robinson in that game. We don't need to revisit that, though. You and I were lying.
You sure we don't want to revisit that? Because that was so just god-awful.
Those coaches are gone. Those coaches are gone. We're moving forward. Another Ram who might hit free agency kind of straddles this conversation where the Rams might know something that you don't. But if you look at him on paper, you go, Alaric Jackson is 26. He could be the best tackle available in free agency, as Chris asked. Chris also knows he was suspended for 2 games. Is Jackson a character concern? And could you and I see the Patriots signing both Jackson in free agency and drafting Will Campbell? Please project next year's offensive line. Chris, I can't project next year's offensive line. I will say this, though. I've maintained the Patriots should sign and draft a starting caliber tackle this offseason. They need it for depth purposes. They need 2 new starters. Obviously, there are no guarantees in the draft, but if you give me enough options and I feel like I can plug and play one starter and then the second guy that you draft rotates or competes with Caden Wallace, I'm comfortable enough with that. What do you think about Alaric Jackson, the left tackle from the Rams, who will get a big payday despite this 2-game suspension, and is he a character concern?
Well, I'm excited to go to Indy for reasons like this, to have conversations with people about this player in particular and to find out, is there something that you should be like, maybe you put him over here and like, we don't want to do that. Or, you know what, that's overblown and let's like, it's fine. He'll be good for you. Don't worry about it. This is also where, and you were talking about like, you need multiple players. And I've been sort of throwing this theory around quite a bit over the last few weeks. And I'm hearkening back to the 2001 offseason for the Patriots. So after Belichick's first year, Pioli and Belichick signs, I believe it was 17 guys in free agency. And that was Mike Vrabel. That was Brian Cox. That was Mike Compton, David Patton, on and on. And like a majority of those players had some sort of impact on not only that season, but the season after and the season after that. And we're not talking top of the market guys. They were all what you would consider the mid-level players, depth pieces, those sorts of things, but they just signed a bunch of them because their roster wasn't good enough. And they said, we need to increase the level of depth and competition. But then what ended up happening was you have the competition, you have some coaching staff players that the coaching staff knew where to put these players and sort of highlight their strengths, minimize their weaknesses. And the next thing you know, Mike Vrabel is one of the all-time Patriots for that run. Like, just a great player. Mike Compton was awesome for them on the interior. Had to move it to center when they shotgun snap because Damian Woody somehow forgot how to shotgun snap. But like, they were able to do that and still survive. Not only survive, but win a championship.
Roman
Cox
Pfeiffer,
came in.
Bobby
Yeah,
Hamilton.
like there's just so many players like that. And to me, they're going to take big swings. As you said, if Ronnie Stanley's out there, I'm sure they're going to say, what's it going to take Ronnie? You know, if T. Higgins had gotten out there, what's it going to take T? Godwin, they'll be in on these conversations. But to me, it's not even necessarily the pivot because they're still going to take these swings, but I'm targeting 10, 12 guys in that, what I would consider the mid-level, between the $5 and $12 million a year guys, whatever. Look what Washington did last year. There were 3 or 4 guys they signed at about $10 million per. Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biotish, like those sorts of players. They're not great players, but they're solid players. And they helped that team build up, immediately raise the floor. And then because Jaden Daniels had a ridiculous ceiling, that team went bananas. But like, to me, that's what I'm looking at. And I'm saying my roster stinks. I don't like the competition. I don't like that I'm rolling out DeMontre Jacobs through no fault of his own every single week at tackle because we don't have anybody else. I'm making sure that I have 4 or 5 guys that, you know what? You stink. You haven't been good this week. You're out. He's in. He'll get the crack at it. And this guy's played in the league before. This guy started some games. Like I'm trying to build that up so that I have more answers internally than I did last year or even the year before. And that, again, they're not going to be great players, but maybe you hit on a couple of them. Maybe 2 or 3 of those guys become legit starters for the next 2 or 3 years for you. And you're like, okay, we've handled right tackle now. We don't have to worry about that anymore until 2028 or 2029. And that'd be like, whew, finally.
I think it's a good point. I wrote about this last month, did a podcast about it. The strategy you mentioned both 24 years ago and the Commanders is not only just packed into these professionals, they're at least starting caliber. They're not going to wow you. Bobby Wagner also in that group for them. Frankie Louvu got a little bit more expensive of a contract, but still not a guy that everyone was like, oh my God, he's in my top 5 of free agent wish list. There's also less downside and risk. If you miss on a 2-year, $15 million contract, who cares? If you miss on Alaric Jackson, who will command a giant deal, and this isn't to dissuade you from signing a 26-year-old potential franchise left tackle who is ascending, and I would say it was just about above average. For the record, never disclosed the details of his suspension, which was a 2-game suspension to start last season. Did admit to being selfish. 26-year-olds, having been one, can certainly be selfish. And the question is then, when you talk about risk, not only just in terms of dollars, but also in terms of the character, if the Patriots can't definitively say, hey, he did X, it was a one-off, that's not him, he deserved the suspension, but we feel confident that that will not be the player we get once we make him, come March whatever, one of the highest paid players on our roster, right, then we do it. If they can't say that, though, then I don't think they'll do it. Because then the risk is not only the opportunity cost of all that money you just gave him that might not be the player that you want. Because, again, he performed very well in the contract year. But you don't know how he's going to respond to that type of money. When you sign older players, more mature players, professional players, not only is the risk lower because of the money being lower, it's because you know exactly what to expect out of them. And you don't need to motivate. You don't need to babysit. You don't need to listen to Kayshon Boutte going on and off and off. And you've seen this, of course, with other free agencies, even Patriots in 2021, which wasn't a ton of unprofessional players, but you get the point. There's more risk in there. So I don't know the answer to the character concern. This is a good question, Chris, and we will follow up, and Mike will probably dig it out in Indianapolis, even though he's there for half the time that I will be. And I could see them signing Jackson in free agency and drafting Will Campbell because that's the depth that they need. But I bet on it, no.
Two things on that, too. On Jackson, they've had some conversations. I do know this, LA had with him. So, again, if they're, as we look at the questionable character concern, whatever that thing is, like, well, it didn't stop them from having some conversations with him about extending him and keeping him as a Ram. So that I guess we would take that as a good sign. And on the Will Campbell thing, should we talk?
Let's
I get into?
I keep saying this, and I've watched more Will Campbell since the last episode, and I'm just going to tell the people that when I tell you I feel X about a certain prospect, that's going to be black and white. There's no walking it back. We also have 2 more draft questions here coming up with the mailbag. I'm not putting off draft coverage. It's just something that I want to wait, do the research, and then boom, we will have a month and a half of content after free agency settles down. But on the draft, quickly, this is from Ashley, who hasn't written in a while. Hello, Ashley.
Hi,
Andrew,
Ashley.
do you think trading back at number 4 is a realistic option for the Patriots? Or do you just take the best available player on your board? And she lists because she knows Mike Giardi would forget who's at the top of everyone's boards. Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, and Mason Graham. Thanks. So do you think trading back is a realistic option? If so, how would it happen? And I assume you would be comfortable taking the best player available on the board because, as everyone said, there aren't that many blue chip players at premium positions.
So the more people I talk to, and look, everybody has a little bit of a different slant. Obviously, everybody has their own way of scouting players and how they rate them. But the more people I talk to that I trust, the more I hear there's 2 blue chippers. Like 2, don't worry about it. Like that guy should be good unless, whatever. And that's Travis Hunter and that's Abdul Carter. So there are some people that think Mason Graham's a blue chipper. There are some that think he's a good player, not a great player. There's some people that think Will Campbell will be an excellent pro and could play left tackle. There are others that think the whole arm thing and he's going to be a guard. And do you draft a guard at 4? I would say, no, you don't draft a guard at 4, although some people will push back on that and say it doesn't matter anymore, just get good players. So to me, I would consider moving back. If I'm sitting there at 4 and if I'm the Patriots and I feel that way, that there's only 2 guys and those 2 guys are gone by the time I pick, then I would go back. But I'm not one who's trading back to 15. I'm trading back from 4 to 7. Yes, I would trade with the Jets. 4 to 8, 4 to 9. Like beyond that, then I think you start to get in that area where, well, what the hell are you doing now? Like, are you going with the old school, like the Belichick? We'll just get a bunch of B players and pass on the B plus, A minus player because I'm going to coach them up. No, your roster says that you need as many good players as an elite, and if you can find an elite player, go find them because they need them. They don't have any aside from Christian Gonzalez, Christian Barmore if he's healthy, and you're hoping Drake May, right? Like so, I'm not like last year. I didn't want to move. I wanted to stay at 3, pick the damn quarterback, do the thing. This year, I'm much more open to moving back because, as I mentioned earlier, it's just not what you need. It's not necessarily there for you sitting there at 4. So I would consider going back. And if I can pick up another dart throw or 2 in this draft or next, I'll do it.
And the beauty of picking at 4, I think, is twofold. As much as no one wanted them to be here, well, some people were content watching the Patriots win their last game of the season as they take a sip of water on this very podcast. But the beauty of picking at 4 is twofold. Number one, you can plan out exactly all of the scenarios that will happen in front of you, picks 1, 2, and 3. You cannot do this at, let's say, pick number 19. Okay, you just have to sit and wait and be patient. You can map out scenarios and surprise. You still might have something crop up you didn't expect come draft day. At number 4, they'll know if we have 3 targets and they're gone, this is what we're going to do. If there's still one available, this is what we're going to do. Or if we're on the fence and we want to take calls, they can do that. So, Ashley, this is the boring answer. I do think it is a realistic option for them to trade back. I also think they could take the best player available pending those scenarios. I also agree with you. And I can't say this any more strongly, that they should not trade out of the top 10. Like, it's just not – it would have to be a Godfather, insane, the Jaguars are deep into the tequila, or the Raiders are drinking whatever you would have out there in the desert, and they call and you're like, this is stupid. Thank you very much. And I know the Jaguars and Raiders aren't that far behind them, so pick another dumb franchise. Just makes you an offer that gets you out of the top 12 because you need players that will only be available here. It's a shallow draft. If you're going to move back, do it somewhere within the top 10. One of those players, Troy wants to know about, quote, I know draft analysts are really high on Travis Hunter, but could you discuss some of the concerns or question marks around him? I read that his game against BYU was rough and that playing against stronger competition showed some weaknesses. Is that accurate? Well, first of all, and this happens every year, so this is not picking on Troy or any of the draft analysts that he just mentioned. When you play against better competition, okay, you tend to play worse. Okay, that's just how it goes. That's competition. So I don't knock players for that intrinsically. It does provide greater insight, of course, because that's the closest comparison until you get to the NFL of what it would be like playing in the NFL. For example, players who thrive at the Senior Bowl, 2 thumbs up, not only just for me, but for teams like the Mike Vrabel Titans, the Philadelphia Eagles, as we know, the Bill Belichick Patriots. His weaknesses, what would you say they are for a guy who is one of the 2, as you've heard, blue chippers in this draft?
I mean, I still think there's some actual question about what's he going to be best at? Like, where should he best be deployed? And honestly, like, I've gotten a mix. It's like he's a receiver. He's Garrett Wilson, which, I mean, I love Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's not a generational talent. He's a really good player, high volume guy, like a good player. But anyway, or is he a corner? And then, you've automatically got a number 1 corner. And then you're figuring out, here's 10 plays that we're going to play him on offense and get some value out of him there. Although, as we've, people have gone sort of deep into this, the guys that did it didn't really have that much of an impact. Dion, Champ Bailey, Charles Woodson, like at the NFL level, and maybe the NFL is more open to it now than they've ever been. But like those guys, Dion had like 40 catches or something. It's like, not like it's not. It's just not it's asking a lot. And I know he did it at Colorado when his conditioning is unbelievable, but like that's a thing. And if I'm the Patriots, again, you're looking at it alone. If he's a wide receiver and he was sitting there at 4 and I thought he was a 1, all right. Like I'm on. He's a corner. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having 2 awesome corners. Like, that's great. But like, maybe that's where I'd be like, does anybody want to come up and get that pick if he's sitting there? Like, and maybe I do move back a few spots and then I get an extra first or a second. And like, now I've got more dart throws. Like, he's not super physical. That's I'm curious to see height, weight situation. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if he's 178, 180 pounds, which is a little light. When you watch him tackle, he's a willing tackler, but he's not super physical. And so, and when we see this all the time, like, teams will target you oh, he's not good in space, or he doesn't like to tackle, or he's not very good at tackling. Well, guess what? We're going to throw a bunch of wide receiver screens at you, and you're going to have to dodge the tight end, the guard, the tackle, another wide receiver, and after the third one, I don't feel like doing this anymore. And then the next thing you know, it's a 28-yard gain down your sideline because you're out. So
just crack tosses. Like how often do you want to crack replace here
right.
defense? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we saw that quite a bit over the last couple of years of the Patriots. Like, just that guy doesn't want to do that, so let's just keep going there.
Yeah, J.C. Jackson, ring any bells? Look, I want to start by saying again, this guy is deservedly so. Maybe not consensus, but close enough. The number one player, number two player in the draft, like outstanding talent, generational. Some people differ on the definition, which of course you can find in the dictionary, but in NFL term, once every 6 years, once every 10 years, 12 years. I don't know. I know Travis Hunter is an exceptional football player. I would have him at corner. I think the height, weight, speed stuff is all going to check out. He is a little bit lean. To your point about the physicality, I think he makes up for that being an exceptional ball hawk and just the natural instincts on both sides of the ball that, look, there's a lot of study that goes into playing both sides, even if you're in a simpler and up-tempo system and the way the splits are in college. Sometimes even if it's quarters coverage, you're just playing man, and that's what he did a lot at Colorado, and he was good at it. You love to bank on that type of talent where you just roll it out, takes 2 minutes, you go, that's the guy who's supposed to go number two, even if you knew none of the names. I am a little concerned about the mileage because you hear this about Alabama players, and that's, under Nick Saban was more about the physical nature of the practices and obviously playing in the SEC and just the way that they chose to prepare and play. If he has all of these unprecedented number of snaps coming into the NFL, even if he picks one position, I think he should, is his career, his lifespan as an NFL player a little bit shorter as a result? I don't know. That's beyond me. His conditioning is, of course, outstanding. But I think the physicality part, how lean he is, and the mileage are the things that would worry me. But on a scale of 1 to 10, these are all 2s and 3s, understanding that this player is a solid 9, if not a little bit higher.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what happens during draft season, right? Like if you ever popped on a Colorado game over the last couple of years, you're like, oh, that dude is he's legit. And now we get into the arm length and this and that and the other thing. And then you find the one tape where he didn't, I didn't like the effort there. Or that tackle was, it's like, okay, yeah, but there's 75 other 80, in his case, he's playing 100 freaking plays. Like you're like, there's a lot of awesome tape out there, but we focus on, or you find the few things and say, well, is that going to be a problem? That's how it goes this time of year.
My least favorite part of draft season, and I don't say this as in I dread it because I also tend to laugh at it or write about it, is the first and second week of April when everyone has exhausted all of their takes. We are literally just killing time. And then this is not personal. I don't know him. But we all heard last year from Tony Pauline how much Elliott Wolf was in love, in deep, unrequited, maybe it was requited, I don't know, just everlasting love with J.J. McCarthy. And oh my God, all these GMs told him about it. Where did that go? And I just had to call BS in the middle. And we're doing shows. It was like, we got a show to do today. I go, if this happens with a guy who I thought would go closer to where Mac Jones did at 15, ended up did versus number 3, then you never have to have me back. I still do those shows. They're silly season. And what I'm saying is when we talk about worries around Travis Hunter, don't listen to that stuff in early April. Don't put too much stock in what we're saying now, but we're here to answer your questions. We did. And it's still mid-February, and I just don't know how that's possible. All right, the last question.
Yeah, but what about his fiance and that weird thing that was going on there?
You know what I would love, though? You know how this happens like every couple of years? Some player is spotted doing something anonymous, and I'm not getting conspiratorial here, at the combine, like crosses the street, gives a 20 to an unhoused person, and everyone's like, oh my God. And you're like, like everything's caught on camera. It's a small city. We're all walking around the same streets. You run into literally everybody at the combine. What would a planned, if this happened, charitable act gone wrong be? Like someone comes in thinking, oh, you got to get him like Wendy's. Like you bring an unhoused person like some sort of food, but then it's a salad from Wendy's. And I was like, you couldn't just spare an extra couple bucks, or you only spent money on the dollar menu. You know what I mean? Like This looks great, sounds good, but the execution's a little bit off, and then you're kind of muddied. And what your PR team or whomever is staging this. Not Travis Hunter, just theoretical prospect. Like what would be an example of where this kind of backfires in a way if more agents like this is This is my silly season. This is what I want from my
I don't know that I have anything for you there on that one.
Nothing? Okay.
What if the person was a vegan and you brought him a cheeseburger with bacon?
Or you get them rollerblades and they don't know how to rollerblade. They just, ends up in like a minor accident. You're like, okay, this didn't, but you just walk away.
That didn't quite go the way I wanted it
to.
Right,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because some sick person who is employed or works as an agent or a PR person is surely think, oh, maybe we could do this, we can make it work. Just the risk obviously also involved is ever uncovered, then you just look like the biggest buffoon. But that's also what the combine is for as well as silly season. All right, last one. I really picked this question out, because I know he's a loyal listener or he just likes asking questions and hopefully learns the answers. The delineation between remodeling and retooling the franchise. Is there one, Mike Giardi? Because Ed would like to know how much roster remodeling and retooling will be needed to be done to this Patriots roster.
Anytime someone uses the word retool, I think of Christmas Vacation when he's, I'll retool you, the boss man. In this case, you have so few building blocks that it is a rebuild. Like you just don't have, again, I mentioned Gonzalez. Okay. You feel great about that. Drake looks like it's headed in the right direction. You feel good about that. Barmore is such a big question mark just in terms of like, is he going to be able to play? I was actually, by the way, looking up his contract. They have a kind of an out built in after this coming season. So just, again, it start to think about like his health and sort of what he can manage for the team. But then otherwise you're like, okay, he's fine. Like, Ramondre Stevenson, it's Kyle Duggar. It's okay. There's some professional players on this team, but not like, oh my God, like,
right.
We got to keep that group together. To me, it's just like, we can do better across the board. Someone asked me a question actually in Boston Sports Journal today when I was doing a Q&A, and it was like, how many Patriots would start on the Eagles? And I came up with Gonzalez.
Mm-hmm.
I actually said, well, I could see a Peppers, Duggar over Reed Blankenship type situation. Like if you're, depending on what you're looking for, and obviously depending on where Jabril's
healthy Duggar too.
Yeah. And then Onwenu over Becton maybe at guard. And that's it. Like, that's legitimately it. You cannot look at any other position and say, oh, I do that. I mean, or Barmore was healthy. Barmore over Milton Williams or who's about to get paid or something like that, like Jordan Davis. Okay, fine. But like, that's how far you are from doing it. And then, you know what? If you want to just turn that and look at the Chiefs, you're kind of in the same place where you just be like, he's better. Like you got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think Onwenu we get the check there because I think the contract Mekhi Becton will get this month or next month will be smaller than what Onwenu got last year. And I understand the year that Onwenu is coming off of, but you also have to factor in the fact that they had a rookie offensive line coach, these new techniques, nothing was good around him. Oh, we still have to flip-flop you, by the way, between right tackle and right guard. And that versatility was baked into the value that they paid for in free agency, but he's got a longer track record of being good. So I would take Onwenu over Becton, but man, that's a great question. I would say, look, Ed, on a scale of 1 to 10, the remodeling speaks more to me about, and I understand there are synonyms, and this is, again, talking about more silly season for me. Remodeling, to me, though, says like culture. If you're really trying to redesign the purpose of a place, and that could still be a 7 or an 8. The retooling, though, is a 9. Like this is, to Mike's point, very well illustrated with an assist to the BSJ subscriber. You need a ton more talent. That's what it is. So a lot for both. A 16 out of 20. All right. We are going to tell you right now what the combine's really like. Then we're going to tell you what free agency is really like. This is what we're all building towards. This is what most of the offseason is about until we finally get to the draft, and then we're really hanging out for a while. But before we get to that, in the dead of the sports season, I just want you to know when the NHL comes back, when pro basketball comes back, when all of these other sports come back and we are no longer the dead of winter, you can win with Prizepicks as I do. Because I've been playing Prizepicks about as long as I've done this podcast, because it spices up a February Celtics game or a Bruins game in March when they may or may not be out of the playoffs. Because all I have to do on Prizepicks, I don't have to pick winners. I don't have to do anything. I look through all the players, each accompanied by a stat. They go, oh, I think Jason Tatum will have more than 8 rebounds. Boom, hit more. Oh, I think Derek White will have more than 4 assists. Boom, there's my lineup. You build a lineup of 2 to 6 players. You pick more or you pick less, and you lock it in. And right now at Prizepicks, where you can get your money in and out with Venmo or MasterCard or any way you want within 10 to 15 minutes, boom, in and out, you can get $50, 50, if you are a new customer and you play your first $5 lineup. So do it right now. Download the Prizepicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Terms do apply. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. So the Combine. This will run basically Sunday to Sunday in Indianapolis next week. You and I are arriving Monday. Head coaches and GMs will speak on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then each of the following days, including an overlap on Wednesday, you'll have different position groups speak with the media, offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, quarterbacks, receivers, and that'll go through Saturday. The day after these position groups speak, so Wednesday is the first batch. I don't know who's going. It's not the offensive linemen. Let's just say it's defensive backs. They will then do drills that run Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is the TV product. This is the stuff you see commercials for. You do the highlights. Going back 10 years, oh, there's Cam Newton running and jumping. Here comes pick player X, Christian Gonzalez, Patrick Mahomes, whatever it is. That is what the NFL is selling you as the Combine. The underwear Olympics, as it's been said very often, plus a little bit of content for us, the opportunity to go ask questions of head coaches and GMs. That is a lie. That is not what the Combine is really about. I don't say this in jest. I tell you because as I get deeper into this profession, the longer we have this podcast and I write and write and write, there are 2 types of reporting. There is the beat the press release reporting, the transactional stuff that the team is going to tell you about eventually, but you and I get some scoops, and this is part of the job, is you get that first. And there's value in that. The people want to know. Information is currency. There's also the behind-the-scenes reporting, which is kind of what you do at the same time here. And when I reference the late night out at the bars and the steakhouses, that's also what's really being done here. So there are 3 types of people. One who have already heard that kind of, late night. Probably for me, it's steakhouses, Indianapolis, and it doesn't really matter what's being run and jumped and tested and measured and yada, yada. Number 2, people who are like, what the hell are you talking about? And then the people in the middle. So I want to bring everyone to the same level. I want everyone to understand what the Combine is about when we go. So let's start with a very basic question. You can go anywhere in Indianapolis where you've got the convention center, where all the press conferences are held and some of the workouts and all the media. Lucas Oil Stadium, where they do all the drills and this is all connected, or to the bars and the restaurants and the hotels that are the same places every single year that house everybody in the league for a period of about a week, as I said, as everyone dabbles. We'll just call it a bender. I've said alcoholism before. That's not particularly sensitive, but everyone gets after it. What are teams doing? This is the first question. What are teams doing? Go any place, anytime, next week, and explain it to us.
So, a lot of what is going to happen here is a lot of conversations with other teams. You're always, and things probably started getting, the seeds started getting planning at some of these all-star games where we might think about moving on from Cooper Kupp. Yeah, really? Okay, file that away for next time you see him. You still thinking about doing that? Oh, we're thinking about that. What did you think about a 5th? We were thinking a 4th, so forth and so on. So there's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of conversations with the agents, the tampering period. We're already tampering, even though we're not supposed to be tampering.
Tampering.
Yes. And then conversations with you're trying to get to know these kids where, you have the speed dating circuit at like the Senior Bowl where you talk to the kid for 10, 15 minutes, and then that's that. And then it's, okay, well, there was something we didn't like here. There's something we liked, or we saw this and we want it. Now you're going back and you're having more of those conversations to sort of suss out, is this guy a good fit for us, not only as a player, but as a person? And so I think there's so much background work gets done on all of these levels, where it's, I think it's a fascinating time, right? I think the conversations that like you said it, you're constantly just running into people, Mike Vrabel's going to be walking down a hall and he's going to walk by Kevin Stefanski, and they're going to stop and they're going to talk. And then maybe Stefanski says, I think we're going to move on from Jack Conklin. Oh, really? That's just sort of how it plays. And so I think a lot of these things get started by these little drive-bys in the hallways and coffee shops. And bars, etc. Which makes it such a crazy week of just the information trading is nuts.
It is nuts. And there's obviously some smoke that goes out, right? You want to get certain messages out that aren't entirely true. You need to posture through the media. You need to say certain things to other teams. So, like, teams go in with the game plan. My point about, and mostly joking, I'd say a little bit joking, that this is all a lie as far as the testing goes for the prospects, which will be including, as you said, the interviews, where it's the same hallway. Players get 15 minutes. You have a schedule. You're going to talk to the Raiders. Then it'll be the Panthers and the Patriots, whatever. The teams care about the interviews and they care about the medicals. Standardized, all in one place. This is what the prospect is dealing with. This is how much he weighs. This is how tall he is, et cetera, et cetera. Aside from that, teams have never, ever, ever cared less about everything else. The running, the drills, it really is about the interviews and the medicals. So around those, as you said, during the day, there's a very famous Starbucks that everyone happens to go to. And some teams don't like to go to that Starbucks because they know they'll be seen by waiting media members, self-included. You've been there. And I had a coach from a team who was not the Patriots tell me once when he worked for the Colts, he was like, you will never, ever, ever see me because the boss man knew that people get seen there all the time. We are not even in the city center. We go elsewhere to have these kind of meetings. So some teams care, some teams don't. But what they'll do also from a front office standpoint, in addition to just the kind of being out and about and the kind of gossiping and the rumor, is they'll assign members of the front office to go meet with agents, prospective free agents, most often from their teams. But if there's a little bit of overlap of, Mike Giardi is also representing a guy we've already talked about, Eric Jackson. Hey, how's the market looking? What are you thinking? And then they will all report back. So it's not Elliot Wolf or Ryan Cavan going to meet with every single agent. They will pass it off to sometimes an assistant scouting director or pro scouting director or college scouting guy to develop their own contacts. Then they come back and deal with that information and parse out what do we need to achieve next. Within this game plan that they set out from the week is we'll talk to certain people, and sometimes it even includes media as well.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that.
All right. I did mention the hanging out at the bar, so I want to give you one particular picture because this also was a memory for me. My first combine, and this is one of the 4 bars, I'm not going to go out the names, where Mike Vrabel, head coach now of the Patriots, then the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, was standing in the back with Bill O'Brien, then the head coach of the Houston Texans, and Doug Marrone, new Patriots offensive line coach, then the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was close to 4 a.m, all with a Bud Light in hand, standing around like they had just gotten off from work and Anywhere USA and a happy hour, just chilling. And it was like, here are these 3 rival divisional coaches. So as much as we do talk about the information trading and the interviews and the medicals and the yada yada 40s, et cetera, there's also just, I'm going to go see my guys. I'm going to hang out. And you might think that they wear these different colors than they do on Sundays, and that means these are these battles. It's a season-long war. They're just happy to talk shop and hang out. So I did not approach, for the record, first, second year on the beat, go up and chit-chat. Sometimes you do take one off and just go introduce yourself and chit-chat. That was not one of them. But you just sit back and go, that's a little slice of it. Dudes hanging out, sipping Bud Lights at a late hour just because they can. And that's also part of what teams are up to at the combine.
Yeah. Mike Zimmer. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. Mike Zimmer, one year, they brought their own wine to the steakhouse because he's a I don't know what do you call a wine person? They have like a title?
Well, there's an official process if you are a sommelier.
Yes, I think it's something different, but whatever. Okay. Like he brought his thing and like he's got the dip in. He's drinking red wine. I'm like, I don't think the dip in the red wine. I don't know, whatever.
This is but like that's tobacco. I wonder.
But it's like, why. But there were other assistants from other teams at the table. It was just like a whole like hodgepodge of people, and you're like, I think it was one of my first years there, and I was just like, okay, that's how it's to what your point was. It's just like there's a lot of intermingling, and it's a lot of people that live the same sort of life, and just like it's nice to be with your peers and have those conversations, and maybe get a little rowdy.
So you mentioned that scene, which brought me back to another memory from that same year. There is a particular steakhouse that flips into a bar after a certain hour. And at this bar/steakhouse that flipped, there was an agent who did the very same thing. Again, we're going to exclude names here, just give you a slice of what it's like. He brought his own menu of wines that he had brought in. And this agent had a couple clients on the Patriots. So I'm getting to know him, shaking hands, how are you, blah, blah, blah. And part of it was just a spectacle of like the caricature of an agent. And it's like, oh, this is not just what you would imagine or you see in TV movies. It's like the man made a point to like, this is my corner. You will come to me. This is the list of wines. And there's always like a decent amount of feeling out process. You meet agent here. That guy runs like the analytics for them or he handles the salary cap, whatever. And it's good to keep those contacts. And others are just like, this is the only conversation I'm going to have with this person because I cannot relate less to camping out in the corner of a steakhouse, bringing my own wine, and then a menu of said wine to kind of introduce and just kind of, because that's a place where people want to be seen and obviously network and connect, but also just kind of put their, on the table.
One of the biggest coaching agents in the free world had a restaurant bar there. So like when you would go, everybody had like, well, you want to go see the king or what's happening with the coaches, like, or the coaches are going to be there. Like I remember running into Dayball, the off season that he became the coach of the Giants, and it's just like that's how it goes,
Or the agency throws a party and it's in a certain part of the bar or hotel, and then everyone who's going to be there, and sometimes it's just kind of staking out outside. The next question: what are agents really doing? Because we talk about guys who are representing upcoming free agents. They're also there to find out information about their own draft prospects. And I wrote a story a couple years ago following an agent, and you can find this at the Herald, what it's really like at the NFL Combine. They're also fishing to see where their guys are at in the draft. Like there's a big difference money-wise, as much as it might not sound like this to you. Guys go in the third round versus the fifth, or the second compared to the fourth, even second to third, honestly. So they're there fishing, gossiping all the same. They're chatting with each other. They will often set up meetings with the same teams, even if they don't have clients on that team or those teams aren't interested in their free agents to be. It's a good time to check in. So everyone's got like a little schedule, get their meetings, kind of checking in, but they're the in-between. As much as the media, in the word medium, literally, is the intermediary for teams and agents and everything, sometimes the agents do that themselves for their own purposes, but also do in the information trading, give to a certain team, oh, I heard this. What can you now tell me from your scouting department about you really, really think of my day 3 receiver that I'm really, really trying to get into day 2?
Yeah, that the information trading, that's what you keep coming back to. It's just so many conversations where like you're trying to get a little sliver from this person, a little sliver there. You give them something, they give you something back, and you're constantly playing that game to sort of, Dick, you said that like it's not just the current guys that are in the league, but it's the guys that they're coming into the league and trying to figure out like, my guy wants an advance. I don't know if I can give him that if he's going to be a 6th round pick when he might be a 3rd. Like I got a different thing, so.
Yeah, and agents, being agents, and there's stuff that flies and stuff you hear you can't run with because you don't know or you don't confirm, or it's just everyone's. I'll say this too: as much as people who are listening are like, "Oh my God, this would be great!" You run into Vrabel, and you see Dayball, and then you see this and that. The other untold part about the combine is any conversation you're having with someone, you or them or both of you, looking over the shoulder, little who else is around, and some people are better about this than others. I'm happy to say, because I just think it's honestly kind of rude. There are very few times I said, hey, can you hold on for a second? I'll be right back, to go run down somebody else, because the eye over the shoulder is for anyone who's more important or might have information that you want. You need to go get that now. But it also is just like, if you were at a party and only knew a couple of people and everyone else was doing that to you, are you having a good time? No. This is not a party. It's work. But it's just to say, like, what am I doing here? So they're just constantly an element of that. What will the Patriots be doing in the combine this year?
Wow. Yeah, they have to have so many conversations. Again, like it's not just free agents, it's trades. Like here's, in our head, you're mapping out, like they obviously, they were in town last week, the scouts, they're building their preliminary board. They're doing all these things. And now it's like, well, let's see if this matches, or do we have to reconsider this? And you're having all conversations. And well, if you look at free agency, like he might be out of our price. Not that anybody should be out of their price range, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we're going to go that far with that guy. So then what's plan B? What's plan C? Like there's so many conversations that they have to have. So they're ready to strike when it's time to strike, so, and obviously this is different too, because now it's a new coaching staff again. There's a new front office structure. Like, I think there'll be a lot of people probably trying to suss out from Boston media in particular, like, who's got more sway? Is it still Elliott carrying the hammer, or is it Vrabel? Is it Cowden? Is it like, like how's that all play? So, they have as much work to do as anybody.
They do. And it will be interesting, too, because you'll see that in the wild, right? Who are they talking to? Who is Elliott talking to versus Vrabel? And those conversations, like I said, certain front office members were assigned to meet with this agent if they're a lower level and they have a smaller agency and don't represent as many players. Others, I know Elliott Wolf handled last year one of the two bigger agencies, and all the agents that dealt with them and all the players associated with that agency were just his, and that was it. And so if that's shuffled now, that will be an indicator to people like you and me, oh, he's not talking to this agency anymore, which means he may or may not have been demoted. And there will be a lot of shuffling in and out. Like, again, joking about the 3 a.m., 4 a.m. You're fishing, man. You're out there. See who you can talk to. Also just introduce yourself to. Make connections. Learn a little bit of ball. Learn about this. Whatever it might be, this is not all, oh, let me out you, take notes or anything. So I've got my phone in my pocket most of these nights. It's just hanging out and connecting. That said, when we produce these pieces, all of us, what we learned at the combine, or in some cases do a mock draft, like there's a lot that's come out of these 4 a.m. conversations. So for them, they need to guard against that. Speaking from their point of view, I think obviously Vrabel will be in the room for these interviews because he'll need to know a certain type of mindset of player. That'll be a big thing for him meeting with the top prospects, as you would expect. Belichick didn't always go to these. Mayo didn't go for most of those days in interviews last year, which isn't a knock on them. It's just to say that I think they took advantage of the Zoom time more. I think Vrabel will want to be in the room. I would expect Elliott to be in the room, Brian Cowden as well. And then also, as you said, trades, free agency, like they should be there, I think, in a big way, doing as much business as they can officially with the prospects and unofficially with trades and free agency. Did we leave anything?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. I was going to say, I think my suspicion is that the Patriots will not be as chatty this period as they were a year ago at this time when they were extremely chatty. I do not foresee that being a thing. I think there is a clear new directive, if you will, that may take us back a little bit to the old days, which is to say the guy who ran the program from 2000 to 2023, 24. The other thing I was thinking of when we were kind of texting when you were going over like what we were going to talk about is like one of the things I find fascinating about this is like you talk to agents, and I've talked to players who are going into free agency, and the different approaches of guys. Like there are agents have told me like, oh, so and so, like if I get a text from a team, just like, hey, what's going on? Like he wants to know. There are other guys that are just like, don't tell me anything. You know, like prep me the day before that people are going to, when tampering starts or whatever, like who's calling, like, and what are the conversations going to be? What are we talking about for money? I've had players tell me like, look, I told my agent, like, I don't want to hear anybody less than pick a figure, $10 million a year. Like if someone calls and they're not willing to go there, screw it. Don't tell me. Don't want to know. Don't care about them. Don't, it's not a thing. Like this is the bar I've set for myself, and your job is to go get me that. And I don't want to hear anything less than that unless no one ever goes there. Like I find it fascinating how different people sort of deal with the prospects of what's about to happen. Cause it is a topsy-turvy time. You think about like, obviously these guys are all making money that 99.9% of the world can't make, even if you're on the lower end, like the ability to, over this short period of time to make the money. But it's like a life-altering time for them too. Like, oh, I've been in New England my whole career. I don't want to go back. Where do I want to go? Like, who wants me? Like, do I want to go live in Arizona? Do I want to live in Kansas City? Like, I can suck it up for a year or two. Well, I have kids. Like, whatever. Like, there's so many different things that we don't consider, like that normal people have to deal with. Like, do I want to put my kids in school there? Like, these are things that never get talked about really in the process, but that these guys have to think about. And to some, it's like at the very top of their list of how I'm prioritizing what's going to happen to me next.
And it's a perfect segue for what free agency is really like. And you kind of laid it out from the player perspective, which I think, look, the point about they're going to make money that the 99.9999% of the world will never even see or experience or have the opportunity to make is the most salient one. We all understand that. I don't think, though, that kind of money has to prohibit us from having any kind of empathy or understanding. Let's go understanding, okay? Throw the sip of the empathy out the door of what it's like. Because in addition to the family factors of where am I going to live, where are they going to go to school, or is my girlfriend or husband or partner or whatever going to experience this with me, is the unknown and the anxiety that surrounds us. Like I've talked to guys who say, I really don't know. And I'll text during the tampering period, how's it going? What have you heard? I'm just sitting at home. And they have a harder time dealing with these days and the opening of free agency. I think it's March 10th and 11th and 12th. And they do getting ready for big games. Because at least then you can practice and you can prepare. This is like, I hired my agent. He's going to get a cut.
Yep.
I don't know who's going to offer. And then sometimes those offers get pulled. Like Jacoby Myers, I remember hearing from people close to him, slowly felt that he was just unwanted by the Patriots. And it was this slow trickle of like disappointment. Again, he lives in Vegas. He makes a ton of money. He plays the game. I get it. Big thumbs up for him. But in those moments of, I have no idea where I'm going to live, and it has to be decided soon. David Andrews went back after getting better offer from the Patriots and then signed Ted Karras in 2021. And it looked like he might be going to Atlanta or Arizona. And then it was like, no, I want to stay here. And he took a crappy deal. There's no way you could tell me 48 hours earlier, crappy team-friendly deal, that right. David Andrews would have expected that. So other guys, like you said, get the luxury of I'll just take the highest offer. Matt Judon said that same year. I didn't choose the Patriots. The Patriots chose me.
Yep.
So there is a lot of anxiety around this from how players experience free agency. Again, the payoff is big. The payoff is large if it matters, and matters most to some of these guys. But it's interesting because I don't know how many of us, unless you're waiting for a certain job, but even then there are only two outcomes, that know what that's kind of like. And I think that gets a little bit overlooked. They're also really not involved in the combine. Like we keep talking about these free agent deals, and sometimes teams just go, I'm not going to talk to you. I don't want to risk any tampering. We got big plans. I'm not going to talk to media. We're not going to tell the teams. Agents have got loose lips. So sometimes there's not as much tampering, but the players are really sitting this one out right up until they get the call from their agent. And then we get texted about this. So that's basically all I got about what free agency is like from the player's perspective.
Yeah, I think we covered it pretty good there. I like you said, sympathy is the wrong word, empathy, but like you do, like it's a life-altering experience one way or the other. You're making a big decision or someone's making a big decision about you, and then you have to pivot like, oh, I think I'm going to be here. And then, no, you know what? Ted Karras, you mentioned him, right? They offered him a contract, and he didn't take it right away, and they pulled the offer. Well, they reduced the offer, but to me, that's essentially pulling the offer. Oh, no, well, you know what? Now you can have it for, instead of $14 million, now it's only 12 or 11, whatever the number was. And it's like, really? Like, that's how you value me? Like that? I'm sorry. That hurt. That hurts feelings. Like that. It's hard not to be that guy, Ted Karras, and say like, well, that's a kick in the groin.
Yeah.
Like, really? Because I didn't give you an immediate answer. Yes, that this is the value set on me, and I think I'm worth a little bit more, that you're going to reduce it. And now I'm supposed to take it. Like that's, if someone like me was in that position, I might give him the double bird. Like, I want to Zoom with you, Bill. Here's this, like, what are we doing?
That also, I'll say, happened in December, January. So that was that 2021 year where Andrews and Karras were here, and Karras re-signed one-year contract to come back as a starting center. I think it was $4 million.
Yep.
And then have been offered an extension, basically, that the team gave him. He was like, all right, that sounds good. And then they came back and said, oh, no, Bill actually didn't approve of that deal that should have gotten done. Anyway, from the team perspective, look, they've been thinking about free agency long before the media and fans put their full attention to it. And you mentioned already, T. Higgins has been on Boston radio and TV shows and podcasts going back to October, November. It's like the big free agent target. Okay. They were preparing for this outcome of him basically being off the market for a long time after. And in the process of this, it's not totally unlike the draft, in which they have a big board. And for example, it goes by positions and how good players are. Mark Daniels, for example, last year had a good note. Tyron Smith and Mike Onwenu were the only offensive tackles on the Patriots board last year. Obviously, they signed Onwenu. I can't confirm they had no interest in Jonah Williams, which I didn't get at the time. Another way, by the way, of just do better than Chuks Okorafor at left tackle, but no, they didn't want to. Fine.
Hey, I was in pro Jonah Williams camp too. Oh, but he got hurt in Arizona. Right, he was in Arizona. You don't know that he would have got hurt here. That's don't give me that crap.
Yeah. So when it gets to free agency, they're gathering all this information, and obviously we make a big deal of the combine. But there are conversations had here or there. Some are in the light of the combine, the Starbucks, the steakhouses, the bars. Others are away from that. It could be a Zoom call. They get enough information. They prepare these contracts ready to go. And some of them are discussed before the tampering period. Others are like, hey, we'll call you right away. But there are players, even players the Patriots re-signed last year, who had no idea right up until the tampering period happened that that deal was even going to be offered. So the teams do approach this, depending on the franchise, play this pretty close to the vest. But again, you have contacts like you do at the combine. Oh, go to talk to this person, I'll handle them. That they all have their own phones because there are too many people to talk to and contingencies out there for them to plan. But then come Monday, like then it's go time. Then you have all the phones going and you're getting calls. And sometimes it's from big national insiders or other agents or this and that. And that's when everything starts flying as far as how teams experience and approach free agency, what it's really like behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, it's teams do it differently. Like, you're like, well, yeah, a lot of teams will they don't want to risk the tampering aspect of it. And there are some that are like, these rules are stupid and we're going to do what we want. And like, we're going to trust that, you know what, maybe it gets leaked that we might have had a conversation earlier and then what's really going to happen. And generally nothing happens, like it's the way it is. Like, whatever. Again, that's the legal tampering period is like the made for TV movie. Like you just like, how can we add something to this to create more interest in something that already has a ton of interest? Like, I don't know. That's the league.
Yeah. All right. Last one, the least important one, but we do play a role. How did the media experience and approach free agency? Do you want to go first or you want me to?
You can go first.
Okay. If you saw Mike Giardi, the unanswered texts and calls that I have around early March, and then certainly in that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you could say, I can confirm Andrew Callahan is the biggest loser in the world. To which I would say, hey, a success rate of even 2-3% from these people close to players in the Patriots, agents representing other players, people within the team, people within other teams, is slowly over 7 years to build out a network. You go, wow, that sucks. But when you do get the call back, you get the text back, because this is just like it is sitting at a Starbucks, hanging out in a hotel lobby, being in a bar at the combine. This is fishing. The longer you keep your lines in the water, the more lines that you have, the higher success rate you're going to have. But I'm at home, tethered to my laptop, pacing around my apartment. If I'm going to the gym, my laptop is in my gym bag, get a quick workout in and go back, text from the elliptical or whatever. Like, this is what it is at home for us. I'll say this. You've laid a lot of groundwork talking to people towards the end of the season, start of the offseason, certainly at the combine. Because if you're cold texting or calling an agent or an executive or a player or whatever, March 10th for the first time, forget it. No one is getting back to you. Okay? But that is how I think most of us who are working to report in the beat the press release version of this are trying to handle it. And then sometimes you get information from someone who you've got a good relationship with, but sends it in a group text. Like when you see signings, there you go, the big nod, from 4 reporters, boom, 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 separated by 3, 4, 5 seconds on X that all say the same thing. That's because whatever person they were talking to sent it to them all at the same time. And I had this with the Shaq Mason trade. Person I had been in contact with this, sent it to several of us. Then you're just racing to tweet. At which point you're going, oh my God, I've got like a trade to scoop. This is great. And then also, how is my life reduced to like the 4 seconds if I have it versus Mike Garafolo does? And that's been my experience covering one team, again, for 7 years now, which is, was made more complicated by COVID. But you've covered the league at large, multiple teams, and done this for a lot longer. So fill in the gaps and take this even further.
Well, I'll give you and I've told you this before, I'll give you how the sausage was made at the NFL Network, in that the way they wanted it structured there was they wanted all the breaking news to run through the insiders, and that would be Ian Rappaport, Mike Garafolo, and Tom Pelissero. And when I first joined, I was like, I hate this. Like, I've built, I'd been working in the business for 20 years. I built these relationships. Like, why should I cede control of a story to someone else? And then I had my good friend James Palmer, who also worked there at the time, was like, I know I've had a hard time wrapping my head around it. He said, but what I've learned is they're going to make the splash. We own the ripples. He's like, because they're not talking about, like, especially in the immediacy of the first 2-3 days, the big signings of free agency, it's fast and furious. And there's not a lot of time for analysis from them. That's where we come in. That's where, like, when I was there, okay, Patriots are signing Hunter Henry. I make some calls. Boom. Hey, look, he was John Smith, oh, he was the first guy we targeted, period, end of story. Like that is the first pass catcher, receiver, tight end. That's who we wanted. Boom. You're doing these things where they're just reporting the numbers and this is what happened. And so like it took I mean, I didn't love it, but like that's sort of how they wanted to approach it. I think to your point, like I think all of us are in that same place where, and this is when I was covering all these teams that I was in charge of at the NFL Network, or just doing the one team where you're like, you don't want to leave the house. You don't want to go to I don't want to go to the bathroom. I got to bring my phone in there with me. Like you do, like I haven't showered in 2 days, but I probably should shower. But boy, if I go in the shower and my phone starts buzzing and I can't, and then Callahan gets it before I did because, I was scrubbing behind my ear. Like that's just, I can't. So it's really high stress for what I would say, especially as I get older, is very little payoff at this juncture. I think the funny thing now is, or the way it's changed so much is that, like, obviously when I first started, social media wasn't a thing. So my first 10 years in TV, 12 years in TV, it wasn't a thing. So that was it's in the newspaper. That the next day they get the story, and then you're waiting to make sure that you have it and it's in the Globe. And then, like, we didn't have the outlets to do this. The websites weren't, like, people weren't doing all that stuff. And now it's like literally, as you mentioned, group texts and who got it out faster, and then no one really cares anymore. Like it's pretty much everybody, I think, at this point who follows the league is just like, I Schefter or Rapp or somebody broke it. Like it's not, because everybody's throwing it out there at the same time. It's like it used to be like, oh, Giardi broke that story. Right. And now it's just like 900 people tweeted about it right around the same time. Like, I don't know who had it first. I don't really care. The Patriots signed whoever, T. Higgins, and let's go,
It's interesting on a lot of levels, but I can't shake the thought that you just shared, and this is not like people who would listen to this and be like, oh, they're just mad like they got beat on a story. If I couldn't handle getting beat on a scoop in this competitive a beat, forget the national guys, forget Schefter and Ian and Pellicer and Gerfel, just dealing with you and Mike Reese and everybody else, I would be in a straitjacket. I would not be on this podcast. I would be in a very padded room if I couldn't handle it. Like that, I'm competitive. I want to get that done. But I also can't shake the idea, like you said, how much it matters, and we want the information we want to have sooner. And I just wonder if the coverage has gotten better as a result of that or not, because ultimately I'm here to get it right and to get as many details as possible versus just boom, the headline stuff. Like, don't get me wrong. When I had it first and was busy making sure I had finalized Kendrick Bourne's re-signing last year, and then Schefter hasn't, I'm like, well, here are the full details that I was bothered to type out. That pissed me off for days, which I shouldn't have had. I had the first on that in the information. But if I look at it like that versus, is this the most complete picture? Is this the most accurate? That's what I want to do. I just, there's no going back, obviously, and I don't lament that. I just wonder how much better we've made versus here's the full story, not necessarily newspaper form, but a little bit later versus the expediency and the cheapness of that and what we sacrifice for the timing of it, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's why I appreciate, you've done it the last couple of years with Doug. I've done it the last couple of years, sort of like the season's over, but you're working as the season's getting over. I'm telling the story of the season. And then you talk to some people after it's over and you do this sort of much more comprehensive, like, picture of what happened. And you can leak out a detail here. You might include it in a story here, but like the full breadth of what happened and being able to roll up your sleeves and get into it and explain, I mentioned the Mayo thing, obviously, and like having a player tell me, like, I kind of knew, like, early, like how early, like in the spring, summer, that we were kind of making it up as we went along. And like, I had this concern, like we're going to have to go through a full season where we're like, this is what's happening. And then when you start to look at how it happened and what happened and all the different things that played out, you're like, I can understand why you felt that way. And like, you start to give you a better idea of what was going on behind the scenes. And I think that's the stuff that, like, unfortunately, that gets lost in Twitter and social media because it's this quick little blurb. And I think our attention spans now as a society has shrink to such a point where sometimes we even have a hard time reading a full tweet. I can't tell you, I'm sure you too, or how many times you send out a tweet and then someone says something back to it and you're like, it's right there in the tweet. it's the second part of the tweet. You didn't, and it's not even one of those like continues. No, it's like
Right.
literally right there. There's 3 sentences, and you somehow couldn't get to the third before you sent me this tweet about the third sentence. Like that's where we're at now, where like that part of it I think is bad for everything. Like you don't fully understand or take the time to fully understand sort of what's happened and why it happened, and then it's easy to make rash judgments and be wildly wrong, but not do the research to figure out why you were wildly wrong.
And I think that's all perfectly accurate and legitimate, and I agree with that. I want to steer away from like the gripes of social media, though, because I think that what you hit on there too is also something that's important. It's just the timing aspect of it. Like you and I will try to mine as much information as we can at the combine, and some people will just have the answer of like, "I'll tell you later. I'll tell you once it's done." And either that's I need to give this to Ian or Schefter in exchange for information that I want later. Like we were talking about earlier, is my guy really going to go in the second? Are we looking at third? Where's he likely to go? How can I help him out? Because they're serving the players. Or is it, I'm not at liberty to say yet, but once this happens, just like a lot of people that Doug and I talked to for that story, yeah, we're in contact during the season, but they say, I'm not going to say anything right now because we got a season going on. And we still might turn this around as bad as it looks. I'll talk to you after the season. And that's when the information comes out and that's when it flows. So sometimes, like you're talking about owning the ripples, sometimes that's the only option. Sometimes it's the best option. But that's also the divide that's been made here as opposed to what was years and years ago. No one cares about this now. Like the big Sunday notes, like you saved all your stuff. And it was the complete picture and more that everyone kind of dove into. So it's been interesting. I have come to appreciate more of the what won't they tell you kind of reporting. And not because it's negative or it gets headlines or it's clickbait or this and that. It's just the what is real reporting. It's unearthing new and fresh and, of course, most importantly, accurate information to inform people things they could not know otherwise and take them places they could not go. If the Patriots are eventually going to tell you they signed Chris Godwin, great. I would love to be able to first to tell you that. I accept that I probably won't be. I'm still going to try to get it. But what were the conversations that led up to that? Or after a bad season, what the hell happened? That kind of what won't they tell you reporting is become more valuable to me. And so anyway, despite that, I will still be at home. I will still be a loser with 100 unanswered texts and calls. And I will be at home, not showering now because I never considered that. You gross veteran of this couch.
Giardi, you're looking pretty greasy. I'm like, yeah, I don't remember the last time I showered. It's been a few days.
But this was good. I hope this podcast in and of itself this is one of the longest ones, and you've always more gracious with your time than anybody else because I bug you the most.
You are
served as some kind of behind the scenes reporting. Like, I don't think you're going to hear this many other places. You've certainly gotten tidbits. It's piqued my interest as a fan. What's it really like at the combine? What's it really like for free agency? And that's the stuff we want to do here. Anyone can do who should they sign, and we'll do more wish lists and free agency and all that stuff. But substantive stuff, the stuff that lasts, that's the stuff to me that matters. And so I hope people got a little bit of that today.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It's funny, we all have stories that we wouldn't tell on a podcast because we don't want to. But it's like there's so much stuff that goes on, and I could tell you stories like we were talking about breaking news. I could tell you stories for days, like of things that I had, but you wanted another. Like, okay, I trust this person, but to a point, I always ask the question like, well, why would they give me this, or what's the angle for this? And there are times where I'm just like, I don't trust it, and it turns out it's right. And I had the story and I didn't go with it. And occasionally you look at yourself and go, you just should have, you wuss. Why did you not? But a lot of times, and maybe again, it's just like having done this for a long time. A lot of times I'm just like, it's okay. Like the competitive thing that made me nuts. I'm still nuts about that stuff, but it's also like you didn't feel 100% confident in it, and you don't go do it unless you feel 100% confident. And there are plenty of people that will go out there with the one source and just let it fly. And if it's wrong, just keep tweeting until you forget about it or whatever. But it's like I hold things that I missed. And thankfully there haven't been a lot of them, like in terms of like I hold those things, like I'll take those to the, they'll still to this day, I might pop, my eyes might pop open at 4 a.m. on a random Tuesday going, how the F did you get that wrong? Don't ever let it happen again. Now go back to sleep.
Yeah. And look, it could sound like, oh, I had this first, this and that. We're not going to give you like examples. Like it just happens. You're in a game long enough. Like that's just how it goes. And you live and you move on. And the pages never turn faster. So, but I definitely resonate. That resonates with me. You idiot. You've done this. You suck. I can't sleep anymore. But enough about us. All right. The Patriots will be at the Combine next week. So will you. So will I. We will have some insider information as we go and work. And you just heard how we're going to try to make it happen next week. And then we will come back and disclose more. Next episode will be Michael Holley. He will have untold stories about Mike Vrabel, which I'm very much looking forward to. And I know you could have had a couple here. So when that episode airs, you can again say, oh, I should have had that first. Why did Holley beat me to that Mike Vrabel story? Sound good?
Yeah. Deal.
Thanks, pal.
All right, buddy.